Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pod Scum. This right here, as you all know by now, is the podcast where we dive into the deep, dark, murky waters with a plethora of legendary guests. I am, of course, your host, your bastard of ceremonies, the #1 scumbag, Rex Ruger. That's REXXX. You might also know me as the King of Sleaze, a.k.a. the Hair Metal High Priest, and most importantly, a.k.a. Diamond David Lee Roth Jr. That's right. Take a look, folks. Should be pretty noticeable, even to the untrained eye, that you're looking at the son of glam, the front man for the band. Just smoked a few grams. I got 1 million fans. I'm your ice cream man, Mr. Wop Bop Loo Bop Wop Bam Bam Shazam. Hot damn. Whew. Feeling good? Of course, everybody in the house, including my beautiful audience, looking good. For me, that's made possible by the one and only product endorsed by Pod Scum. You want the quaff like Roth? Get you some. Coming to you, as always, from the Lavender Lounge of Love, joined as always by the great Keith Hernandez Puppet. Together, we are bringing you the No Frills podcast. No frills, but plenty of thrills. And that's looking at the face of the #1 rock star in the biz, moi. And if you are watching, be sure to like and subscribe to the Pod Scum YouTube channel. And also be sure to follow us on Facebook. Our guest is here. We're going to get right into it and chop it up with him. This one's going to be fun. Let's fucking do it. Put my old man glasses on here. Hey, Christian, there he is. How are you, buddy?
Good. How about you?
You're really letting it, you're getting very robust. You're really letting the beard fill out nicely.
Yeah, it's getting darker too. I'm quite happy with it.
I see that you're, yeah. And the good thing is, you haven't gotten to the point where I am yet with a lot of gray in it.
Actually, I am, but I'm painting it.
Okay.
I look a little bit younger than I actually am.
That's all right. Hey, kudos to you for revealing that. You know what I mean? That that you're secure enough to say, hey, I'm coloring the shit,
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Like, what the fuck?
Christian Munzner, I know most people might know you from OBSCURA, but what I love about you is that you, like me, hardest working guy in show business. We're out there getting our grind on. You got your hands in a lot of different stews here, right?
Yeah, that's true. I can't really sit still. Like, I constantly have to work on something. Otherwise,
Yeah, I know. You like to stay busy. So your main focus right now is probably what? ALKALOID?
Well, we just finished recording the ALKALOID album. We finished early this year, but like it's finally being released in September. So we released 2 singles so far. So obviously we're busy doing some promo work to get that thing out.
Yeah.
But also, like, over the summer, we're having a little bit of a break, but I'm continuing touring with OBSCURA. We're doing a tour of Latin America in October and November.
Yeah.
And then we're doing a tour in the UK and Great Britain, Ireland, Scotland in November, December. I don't know if that one has been announced yet. And I might do another thing in Australia in between those 2 tours, not with OBSCURA, but with another band, but it's not confirmed yet, so I don't know. And also, I recently joined RETROMORPHOSIS, which is basically Spawn of Possession, the last lineup, but with a new drummer. And we finished recording the new album, which is currently being mixed and hopefully being released early next year.
Okay.
I've been recording another album with some Texas band from America, which is not announced yet either, so I can't really mention the name yet. But
fair enough.
We recorded the album. It's going to be out early next year. We're doing a music video in September, so I'm preparing for these kind of things. As well as, like, I wrote a couple new Eternity's End songs, so most likely we're starting recording that album maybe once I'm done with the touring, like early next year. And then we'll see what else comes along.
And when you do stuff from a solo standpoint, because I know you do a lot of stuff solo, and I may have asked you this the last time that we talked, what is it about when you do stuff solo that, where you don't really, scratch that itch, so to speak, and get out everything that you need to get out when you're in bands? Like, what's the solo work all about? Like, what's it fulfill for you?
That has changed a little bit over the years, what it means, because when I did my first solo record, Time Warp, back in 2010, 2011, my only band that I really was a fixed member of at that point was OBSCURA.
Mm-hmm.
And OBSCURA is a band that allows a lot of very diverse and different influences, but still I couldn't do everything I wanted to at the time. in that band. So my first solo album was really an accumulation of all kinds of things that I like, where I was like, I do not want to limit myself to one particular style. I want to get out everything that comes to my mind musically that I like, obviously, and that I can't really do in a band context, even though there are still some riff ideas that might also fit on Obscura songs. But for the most part, this album showed a lot of other sides of my playing. Obviously, it was very guitar focused. I mean, when I'm in a band, I always have to play for the song first. I mean, there's always I always want to complement the songs. I can't like just play 5-minute guitar solos all the time, but in a solo setting, I kind of have the freedom to really let go over long chord progressions or vamps that go on for 2-3 minutes, and I can just let loose with my playing. So that was kind of the thing on the first one. Second one kind of similar, even though the first one was more solo guitar focused. The second one was more focused on the riffs.
Yeah.
The third one was really because I'm just a big fan of instrumental music in general, you know. So I like stuff like 80s Winnie Moore and Tony McAlpine records and Marty Friedman and, you know, Michael Firkins, Jason Becker, Greg Howe, that kind of stuff. So I'm really into that, and I just wanted to have an outlet for that also, because it was always my dream to do an instrumental guitar record since I was in my teenage years.
Yeah.
And so my last solo record, the third one that I did, was basically really a tribute to the 80s Shrapnel Records guitar players that are basically my musical DNA. And I really wanted to do an album particularly in that style. And that's why I do solo stuff, you know. And also sometimes I might do some stuff a little bit more hard rock based, a little bit more bluesy, a little bit more fusion based, and a bit more groove based stuff that I don't really do in the band so much. So I don't know if I'll ever do a new solo record or an EP, but I have this idea of doing an EP more in this, like, not really neoclassical like my older records, but more like in this like jazzy hard rock kind of style, like Winnie Moore, Meltdown, first Michael Perkins record, something like that. So I play over different grooves with a different kind of tone. You know, I can play more like a Stratocaster or single coil. So I don't know if I'll do that, but that's like kind of something that's in my mind right now if I ever get the time.
And when you're going to sit down to create, what is, you know, take me into what your creative process is like. What's the impetus for you, like, when you create? Like, well, first of all, are you one of these guys? I talked to a lot of musicians on my show here, and that, you know, there always seems to be kind of two schools of thought here. There's guys that are just getting creative sparks throughout the day, and I talked to a lot of guys who are like, you know, humming riffs into their recorders or their phones or whatever. Or there's guys that are very disciplined who say, you know, I'm going to go sit down and treat this like a job. For the next 5 hours, I'm going in that room and I'm going to write music. What kind of creative approach do you take?
Yeah, for me, it's actually a mix of the two, right? So obviously I have this thing that everyone has. I might be teaching, I might just be noodling around on the guitar. I might come up with an idea, you know, by accident.
Right.
I might just be watching TV, strumming a few chords, coming up with a chord progression that I like. So this might happen by accident. At times I'm not really too focused on writing. I'm just doing things, and every once in a while a good idea comes up. When that happens, obviously I will take my phone recorder and either record the idea or write it down, you know, in Guitar Pro if I have a laptop. With me, sometimes it sounds like a cliche. It happens, I dream a melody or something, I wake up, and if I can still remember it, then I send it to my phone. I have the phone lying next to my bed. But then when really the time comes to finalize an album, right? So when I set a deadline, I'm like, okay, I want to have this album written and finished by that and that point. Obviously, I have a big collection of ideas, some of which I may use, some of which I may throw out because they just don't have that quality over time. But then I have obviously my tools and concepts, how I can take this amount of ideas that I have, and then I know kind of how to turn them into songs. And then I really need to make sure I take a couple of hours out of the day where I'm like, okay, now, you know, we're approaching the recording for this album. I need to finalize the songwriting. So for the next 3 months, I'll do like every morning from 10 to 3 or something, you know, I'll just work on that very focused. And even with riff writing, even if something doesn't come up spontaneously and I'm like, I need more ideas, then I really sit down and do like a brainstorming kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You know, like they would do in the companies when they think about new products that they're inventing, you just everything that comes to mind, you know. And obviously 90% of that is bullshit, but there's usually always like 10% remaining with a quality that are worth keeping. And if you keep doing this daily and it becomes kind of a habit, then the ideas also get better. And I always tell my students, you know, in order to be a good songwriter, you also need to practice songwriting. You know, many people think, oh, they just practice scales and arpeggios all day, and then when they have the technique they want, then they write the classic album. But it's not how that works, because you need you need experience writing as well, right? You need to kind of get through the bad ideas, and you need to get through the bad songs to get to the good songs.
Sure.
And it's like kind of cleaning your memory, like your hard drive, you know, and kind of like getting to the good stuff. So you have to really do it as a habit. And yeah, so it's actually a mix of the two, right? So there's these focused time periods. I'm like, we have to write an album now, so I'll make this part of my job. I'll make some hours every day that I can do that. But there's also that thing that really something comes up spontaneously, and like, oh, there's a really cool riff, a really cool chord progression, a really cool melody. No matter what band I'm going to use it for, sometimes I don't know yet, no matter what I'm going to do with it, but I'm like, I feel this idea has some quality, so I'll definitely record it or write it down so I don't forget it.
And what was your upbringing like? Like, how early on in your life did you get a guitar in your hands? And did you have a supportive family? Because I know a lot of times when people go into the arts entertainment field, again, talking to a lot of musicians on here, as I do, you get a lot of parents who are obviously worried about their kids going into, such a speculative kind of field. You know what I mean? Did you have a supportive family, and how early on did you start?
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag, actually, in my case, because in my family, there are a lot of musicians. So my uncle, he has his own orchestra. He has perfect pitch. He's a virtuoso classical violinist, and all his children went into professional music, but they were classical musicians, right? So they play the orchestras in Germany, classical instruments. And in Germany, it's kind of like, Germany is a little bit more conservative. You know, here's like, okay, if you play classical music, this is like respected as a real job, because like the orchestras, it's state funded. You get a fixed income every month. You know, it's just like a fixed job. Obviously, in rock music or heavy metal, the case is quite different, right?
Yeah.
So, obviously, my parents in the beginning were very supportive when I was a child. They wanted me to play an instrument, because my parents also both play piano, so they wanted me to play piano when I was like 5 or 6 years old. But I didn't like it back then. You know? Nowadays, I regret it, because I wish I would be better. I play piano still. I wish I would be better. But back as a kid, I didn't practice. I didn't like it. And then I was like, I know this is not for me. I don't have. And then they thought, okay, I don't have talent for music. And then I started listening to heavy metal when I was like 9 or 10 years old. And then when I was 11 years old, I went actually with my father to see Iron Maiden on the Fear of the Dark tour. And after that, I was like, I want to get a guitar.
Yeah.
And my parents were mainly concerned that I don't practice like it was with the piano. So they were a little bit hesitant, but then they were, okay, if you want the guitar, I'll buy him a guitar. Right. And they were supportive. But then what happened was, when I got older, and then I got into Ingrid Malmsteen and Paul Gilbert and those type of players. And I was like, okay, to get that good, not that I ever got that good, but like my aim was to get that good. And like, to get that good, you need to invest a lot of hours. I read, they've been practicing 6, 8, 10 hours a day. I'm like, this is what I have to do. So I started doing this when I was like 14, 15 years old. And it was kind of nowadays I know that this practicing exaggerated hours, heads through the wall, is not really something you need to do to get that good. It's something that you do in few percent years. It's kind of a how do you say, it's a ventile for something. Yeah. And I see this with a lot of students at that age, but maybe it's necessary for a while just to build speed and dexterity, right? But
sure,
I did that, and then what happened was I neglected school, right? So I wasn't doing that good in school anymore, and this is why my parents were a little bit concerned.
Yeah,
obviously, and then I was on and off. Sometimes I was into music, then I was working jobs again, and then I studied university. I made my degree, which was basically my parents' kind of wish, but then I was like, after that, and this was even after Epitaph, when we did Necrophages, all of that stuff happened while I was in university studying something non-music related. And my parents always thought it's a hobby that ends at some point, and
right. So Iron Maiden was the tipping point for you, though. Would you point to Iron Maiden and say, because most people kind of get the, that spark is usually caused by an artist or a song or an album. So like, was it that Iron Maiden concert that got this jump started for you?
I think so. I mean, the spark before that was the first time I actually realized that I really like music, and guitar-driven, heavier music was when my neighbor actually there was a summer of 1990 or 91 when The Razor's Edge by AC/DC had come out, and he had that on tape. And that was the first thing that ever caught my attention. So that got me into heavy metal, And then, or when it's basically a hard rock band, but that then opened the door for me for bands like Iron Maiden and Metallica and Black Sabbath and Megadeth and all that stuff. So that was the first time where I realized, like, I really like music and I really like metal, hard rock stuff. But the Iron Maiden concert was probably the tipping point. I was like, okay, this is I really want to play guitar because this is so cool. This is like the coolest thing in the world, and this is what I want to do. So I'm pretty sure the Iron Maiden concert was what triggered that in me, that I really want to do that, not just listen, just be a fan. But from that moment on, was kind of my dream to be in a band and like play my songs in front of the people and things like that. And so that was really when I started taking it more seriously.
And one thing that I love about this upcoming Alkaloid album, and I've heard the first two singles, Clusterfuck was great. The Cambrian Explosion, I was just listening to before the two of us started the interview. Another fucking fantastic fucking song. But the one thing I like about this album that's coming out, though, is that, you know, with so many people and you know, so much diversity and so many changes in the music business now, where people are putting out singles, they're putting out, you know, EPs. It feels like they're so worried about people's attention span. You guys are putting out a goddamn fucking hour plus of music. I fucking love this.
Yeah, you know, I think with our band, with Alkaloid in particular, where you have these very long-winded compositions, and we're not really a band that gets to the point very quickly.
Right.
You know? And so I think our target group, I mean, the TikTok, Instagram people who can't listen to a clip longer than 15 seconds.
Right,
I mean, if someone likes that, it's cool with me, you know, but these are probably not the people that would like what we do anyway. Right. And I think we have a fan group, you know, that seeks out that kind of thing. I mean, you know, obviously people's attention spans get shorter. People hardly listen to a full song anymore. Most people, you know, but most people don't also read books anymore. And the people who write books, who I know, they still write books because it's what they have to do. You know, it's their calling, and they do it. And there is still a group of people that connect with it. And obviously, it's a little bit frustrating to think about it from a business point of view, but from an artistic point of view, it's kind of like you just do what you have to do, and there are people who will find you, the people who are on the same wavelength, you know, because all the authors who write books and feel that it's their calling, they could also think, okay, you know, people only like micro content, and why am I even doing this? But people still are doing this, you know, because it's like it's like what you really have to do, and I think there is still a market for that. I mean, you know, we're doing a long form interview now, and people are watching that. Long form 4-hour interviews also exist.
Sure.
So I think there is a completely opposite world to this entire micro content, short attention span kind of thing, you know, and so I'm not really worried that this in any way harms our relatively small success that we have, but I don't think this harms it, because our target group, the people who like our music, they're into that sort of thing anyway.
Yeah.
So that's what I believe. They like having a double vinyl come out and having the collector's editions and these kind of things. So it's a niche, and this niche still exists, you know, people, and so that's what allows us to be able to do this, even though it seems a madness to many people in 2023, you know.
Now, you had a super busy 2021, but we were preceded by that 2020. Obviously, the wheels fell off. The world fucking was in shambles with COVID. How did that directly affect the stuff that you had going on in your ability to go out and promote it? Because obviously 2021, an Eternity's End album came out. The last Obscura album came out. You put out an album with Paradox. So all this stuff comes out in 2021. But, you know, the year before, the whole world kind of shit the bed, so to speak.
Right. So there's two things that happened. One thing, which is obviously bad, was my third solo record, Part of the Hero. You know, I invested a lot of money in the promotion campaign, everything, because I released it on my own, except for in Japan, where I got a label for this. And this album came out right on the day when in Europe, and I think also in the US, the lockdown started, and people were like, obviously not open-minded, but like, hey, I got an album coming up here. Whatever, you know. So this kind of fell a little bit. It was very unfortunate timing, obviously, right? So this album fell through the cracks a little bit. But then what happened was, and obviously the pandemic was horrible. I mean, the overall feeling, I felt the same thing that everybody felt. But what happened was, it kind of took the pressure out a little bit, because it was obvious there wouldn't be any shows or tours happening for a long time.
Right.
And what happened was, like, I felt like I could really focus on writing for that time, right? So I was like, just started writing a lot of music. You know, I locked myself into my house. I just kept writing. And then Steffen asked me if I want to rejoin Obscura. And I think had there not been the pandemic, I might not have done it, because I had all these other album recordings already planned with Eternity's End, you know, and Paradox. And I was like, I want to do this. This is important to me. And if I had joined Obscura at that point without the pandemic, there would have been lots of tours immediately, and I couldn't have finished these other recordings. But I knew, okay, we're going to have a lot of time, right? So And then I started writing all these songs that also ended up on Evalediction, the last OBSCURA record. I wrote the Eternis End record at the same time. And because there was not really anything else going on, I really enjoyed being able to focus on the writing for a year, and knowing there's no time pressure. I felt such an excitement for that in that time. I woke up every day, like couldn't wait to get to the guitar, to my computer, to work on these ideas. I went to bed and I was exhausted. I was like, I have to get up early next morning, continue writing on this idea, because it kept me so excited.
You were driven.
And I don't think this could have happened if I had the usual busy schedule that I have. I wouldn't have been able to do like 3 records in 1 year with that kind of focus on the writing. So obviously now we're touring a lot, and now the intervals between the records that I'm doing are obviously getting a little bit longer.
Yeah. Now, obviously, me as somebody who works as a nurse, my day job, I work in healthcare. So I'm always intrigued when somebody has a health-related story, and I like to pick their brain on it because, that's the field that I work in. I'm always interested in that kind of stuff. So, well, first of all, I'll preface it by saying the other night, me and my wife went to see Def Leppard and Motley Crue. We went to the big arena stadium show, saw the big rock show. Obviously, you see a guy like the guy like Rick Allen, who drums for Def Leppard, with one goddamn arm. It's pretty fucking awe-inspiring. Now, now you haven't lost an arm, but the focal dystonia, which you suffer from, really had to make you reinvent, a lot like the drummer from Def Leppard, really reinvent the way that you approach and play the guitar. What kind of effect did that have on your guitar playing? What changes did you make? Yeah,
so here's the thing. I mean, when it first happened, when first I noticed the first symptoms, I had no clue what was going on, right? So what happened was we were touring, and suddenly I just noticed, my middle finger doesn't hit the notes anymore that I want to hit. And the first thing you think is obviously always a lack of practice, right? So that's what you think. I was thinking, okay, we're touring now. I don't have the time to do the same 4 or 5 hour sessions that I was doing at home. So that was my first impulse, right? My first thought. So I thought, okay, I need to practice more, which obviously is counterintuitive, but all the time. Took me 2 years to get diagnosed. So I did all the mistakes in the book that you can make. I did in that time period to aggravate it and make it worse. But so what happened when it first happened, I was actually on tour, and I was like, man, I can't play certain things anymore the way I used to. So while I was on tour and I had to play shows every night, I was okay, I have to change some fingering. So this is the first thing that happened, was on the Cosmogenesis tours, that I would play things that I normally play with like 1, 2, 4, like index, middle, and pinky. I had to refinger them. I would play them with index finger, ring finger, and pinky. But I didn't have it to the same level I have it now, because everything had to happen so fast, and I had to get all these old habits out. Then I started, even before I knew what happened, just by noticing I don't have the same control of my second finger anymore, I started incorporating more fingers of the right hand for the legato lines, right? So I'm using now more fingers of my right hand for the tapping stuff. I changed picking lines and arpeggio fragments where I would use sometimes the same finger for 2 notes in a row. So I would do position shifts with the index finger or with the pinky to compensate for the loss of that movement. So So in the beginning it was quite traumatic, because I had to do all of this in a very short time, and it took quite some years, until this became second nature. Nowadays I don't have to think about these things anymore, and they just happen. What also happened was I took a lot of therapy classes, obviously, to kind of improve my condition a little bit, to prevent it from getting worse. But what really did to my playing, I think, obviously in the beginning my playing suffered, because there were just certain things I couldn't do anymore. It took me years to find out how can I still play the same things, to work myself back to my old level. But then what happened was, through the therapy measures that I did, through learning what's happening neurologically, even though the damage was done in the left hand and I now have to use compensation techniques for a lot of things, I learned so much about how the brain works, about the importance of the larger muscle groups when you're playing, that actually my right hand technique went through the roof. And for the first time, I felt really confident with my picking. I think my picking got a lot better since then. And I feel my playing got more musical in a way, because I started to focus on other things apart from only the motor skill. I was no longer interested in just copying something someone else did, because there's just some things that I can't do physically that some other players do. So I always had to think of my own things, of my own way of doing things. I think I became a much better writer, and I think I got a much larger appreciation for the music as a whole. I think my ears get better. So it's kind of like what you hear when people are blind, and then suddenly their ear starts to get better, and they develop other senses better. This is kind of what I felt. So from apart from that, having to rework a lot of things and finding new ways to play all the things that I used to play, there's also that thing that it just opened my brain to so many other things that are important as a musician. I maybe if it hadn't happened to me, I might not have had such a big discography, because I probably wouldn't have focused so much on writing.
Right.
Because I also felt a little bit, it's a progressive disorder, even though for me it goes super, super slow. And I think the therapy measures contain it very well. It's kind of like, I felt like this urge, like, I have so much music inside of me, and I don't know how much longer I'll be able to play, hopefully till the end of my life. But with this condition, I don't know. So I'm like, I need to get as much music out as I can, and I still kind of feel that. And I think this is also something that really happened.
Is this a disorder that is particularly common amongst guitar players?
Not necessarily only amongst guitar players, but amongst musicians who practice a lot and tend to over practice. So everyone, obviously, if you play in a punk rock band or something, it's not very likely to happen. But if you practice a lot under a lot of pressure, or you put a lot of pressure on yourself and you do this for a long time, this happens a lot. So it happens mostly to classical musicians. Like the percentage is like 1 out of 100 professional musicians develops this disorder. A lot of classical musicians have it, and they have the disadvantage when you play in an orchestra, you can't really alter your repertoire. It's not like in jazz or rock or metal where you can just say, okay, I just play the solo a little bit different. I use tapping instead of this technique or whatever. This luxury you don't really have in classical music. Right. Or like in jazz music, you could just play something else when you're an improviser, right?
Right.
But so it happens to a lot of musicians in that, but it happens to drummers. They get it in their feet, so they can't do the double bass anymore. It happens to horn players. They get it here in the mouth, and it happens even to secretaries in offices that in the past it used to be they would be on typewriters for hours every day doing the same repetitive movements for a long time. This is when this can happen. So there's
almost very similar to like a carpal tunnel almost.
Yeah, but a carpal tunnel is more like a physical disorder where it's like it causes you pain, and something is really that you can see when you do a scan of your hand that is not right. The dystonia in the hand, everything is okay. It's a neurologic disorder. There's the brain, basically every finger is represented in the brain, and the movement centers of these two fingers basically overlap. It's kind of like they overlap in the brain. So, and then the brain sends a false trigger out. So whenever this finger puts pressure on the string, this finger starts to curl automatically. But the problem is not here. The problem is in the brain. But one of the things I'm doing is I'm getting Botox injections in my forearm 2 times a year, and they weaken the flexor muscles of my middle finger.
Okay.
So the swelling impulse isn't as strong, but the problem is with that it weakens my hand in general, so I don't have the same strength. So when I do bends and vibratos and things like that, I also have to find other ways to use larger muscle groups, because my hand gets too weak from the injections. So that's a bigger.
And because you're so prolific and you do a large abundance of work, practicing, teaching, multiple music projects, were you ever told by a doctor to scale it back at all? Were they concerned about how much playing you were doing?
Well, my doctor is like, he encourages people to play. He's like, a lot of people with this disorder, they kind of lose the hope, they lose the focus, they get depressed from it.
Right.
And then it's very difficult to get back into it. So he sees this very much from the psychological point of view. I had some people that I did retraining with who would say, don't overstrain your hand with technically challenging material every night until you found ways to of alternative movements. And that's also one of the reasons why back in the day I left OBSCURA between 2014 and then rejoined in 2020, because I simply needed to get off the busy touring schedule that particularly this band has. I stayed in many of my other bands because they're not really touring, and we just do a record once in a while. So I need to get out of that for a while to focus on the therapy, which was one of the reasons why I left the band back in the day. And then when Stefan contacted me in 2020 if I want to rejoin when the last lineup quit, I felt confident enough, because after 6 years of therapy, I feel now confident enough to do like these monster tours they were doing of like 2 months in a row, playing this material every night. I feel now confident to do it. And the last couple of tours we did, I also didn't really have big problems. I really felt like I really have this under control now with the things that I learned. Obviously, the dystonia is still there, but it's like now I feel confident enough that I can do this in a touring scenario with all the stress levels that you're facing, and how I can control it to the point it doesn't really trigger my dystonia worse than what would normally happen. Right.
Now, getting to the ALKALOID album, Newman, that's going to be coming out in 2023 here, and it's going to be released how soon?
In September, so in a month from now, I think 23rd September or something like that.
Okay, and the one thing that I love about it, as I said, it does have that very old school vibe, like where you guys said, "To hell with the fucking trends. We're making a long fucking." Takes me back to those like Metallica days when they had like 80-minute albums with 7-minute songs on them. The good old fucking days. You know what I mean? It makes me think about that. But do you guys sit around because of those trends that I'm talking about? Do you guys sit around as a band, or does anybody have any input in saying, hey, and I know you said your audience is into that kind of journey and taking it with you, with the long albums, with the long songs. But does anybody from a label or anybody in the band pipe up and say, people aren't listening to music like this anymore, man? Do we really? Is it going to benefit us to put out a long album where a lot of the deeper tracks might not get heard?
Yeah, well, in the band, I think in the band, the thing is, and it might be actually in this case really good for the music, we're not the smartest when it comes to marketing.
No, I love that you're doing it this way. I completely salute it. I love it.
In like for example, if you take a band like OBSCURA, like Stefan, he really knows how to market a band and build things up, and he's really interested in the management side of things also, and that's why you can really build up the band to the point that so many people know it, And in ALKALOID, it's like no one really cares about that, which is a bad thing. But the good thing is that when it comes to the music, we just do what we want, we just see it from a completely artistic point of view. And that was also the idea of the band in the beginning, that we don't really restrain ourselves through anything. Like in the true sense, there's a true meaning of progressive music. When progressive rock started in the 70s, these bands kind of had like no limits on them. And I know that, I saw the Queen movie where it happened to them, that when they did Bohemian Rhapsody, the guys from the label said, well, we cannot sell this.
Right.
And it became one of their biggest hits. But
it's
like, obviously our label, they were a little bit concerned when the album was like 80 minutes. Like we have to release this in 2 editions or something like that. I don't really know, honestly, what's the deal right now, how it's coming out or not. But they also knew, obviously, when they signed us, that we are that kind of band, where these kind of things happen, that you don't really know what to expect. It even happens in the music. Something might start out sounding like a Yes song, and then turn into Morbid Angel in the middle or something like that.
Right.
And it's just something that we do. And I sometimes I wonder, because a lot of bands became commercially successful that were not really watered down by record companies and don't really have any obviously commercial elements in them. Like a band like Opus, for example, is not particularly commercial music. Or even Dream Theater, everybody would have said, no, don't do this, no one's going to listen to this. And now they're one of the biggest metal bands in the world. And or even a band like Dragon Force, they have like these cheesy choruses and stuff, but they do like 4-minute guitar solos and things like that, And in the old days, label people would have said, you cannot market this, no one's going to buy this, and it still kind of works, and there's an audience, and bands become big that way. And I don't think we'll ever become big with ALKALOID. I think this went out of the window a long time ago anyway, but we just really do what we like, what we love, because we know that our fan group likes that, and we're in the fortunate situation that the label also kind of allows us to do that. So there's no limitations on any of our records that were imposed by a label or anything like that. So
I really love the vocal performances, though, because I really get a very an operatic feel from it. I really hear a lot of Rob Halford. I hear a lot of King Diamond, style vocals. There's certainly some growls in there, and it's certainly I don't want to give the misrepresentation that it's not heavy as fuck, because it certainly is, man. But the clean vocals are very operatic and very beautiful.
Right, it's because we like extreme metal. All of us, we love Morbid Angel and all the Florida death metal bands and all this stuff. And there's a big black metal influence in our music and all the thrash bands. We love all of that, but we also love like a lot of like 80s metal stuff. And we love King Diamond, Judas Priest, obviously Old Fate's Warning. All of that stuff is a very big influence on our music as well. And we're not trying to do this on purpose, but it's just like some of the influences after a while, it just comes together automatically. Even like bands like Yes a lot, or some stuff like Saga or something like that, and we don't really think, oh, now we have to do the Morbid Angel part, and now we do the Yes part or something. It's just these kind of things. They just happen naturally, they happen automatically, but because we don't limit ourselves to something. Sometimes I think sometimes I really would like to do like an old school death metal kind of thing where I really limit my influences to a certain thing. But ALKALOID is not that band. ALKALOID is that kind of band where we can really like just let loose and just just do whatever you want, you know.
And so who is your guy? And when I say that, like, I mean, like, everybody that seems to play an instrument has that band or that guy who, like, when they're playing, I mean, they're just in awe of him. They have such a reverence for them. Is there that guitar player for you in your life, or maybe more than one? Who is the guy that you look to and say, God damn it, I love hearing him play?
And there's so many, because I know so much music, and I have such a huge collection. It's really, really impossible if I like limit it down to one or two guys. Like I leave out so many other people that
I know
important. But there is some players. I mean, and this is really, really just the tip of the iceberg. But when it comes to solo playing, lead playing, melodic sensitivity, like I still, every time I hear Vinnie Moore or Tony McAlpine, like I think these two particularly,
it
still has the same effect I always had. And I just like, man, I just like the no choices, the melodic sensitivity, the phrasing, obviously the technical command, the composition, the whole musicality, But then obviously there's also all of these players that really like the riff guys, that really, really, really inspired me, like James Hetfield, Dave Mustaine, Jeff Walker. These are old Metallica, Megadeth, Annihilator records. Still has the same effect it had on me as a kid, or all the heavy metal bands I like, all the Florida death metal bands. So there's so many of them. Probably my most important musician for me is probably Tony Iommi, because Black Sabbath is probably my favorite band of all time, and he invented the genre, and everything else that we love came after that, and their discography just remained so good throughout all the years, even especially for me the 80s era with Tony Martin, these records. I just love that kind of stuff. And he's not a shredder, Tony Iommi, but like the whole musicality, the concept, the way he invented the genre that we all love and that everyone else built on. He's probably the most important guy for me. And then obviously Yngwie Malmsteen was a big turning point for me when I heard him, because I knew what was possible on the guitar, and it really got me into woodshedding. And it's also, I think, so many other players I love, especially lead players, they wouldn't do what they're doing if it hadn't been for Yngwie, right? So he definitely is like one of these very, very important guys. And with all of these old 80s players, it's like whenever I hear them play, it still has the same effect on me that it used to have years ago.
Takes you right back to being a kid again.
Exactly. It's like a heavy place it takes me to, right? All of my records collection, when I put that stuff on, it really takes me back to a more healthy world and to a more careless world.
I love that. I tell people about music all the time, how like there's no going back in time, but yet music kind of is a time machine, though. You know what I mean? I do hear songs and I'm 15 years old again.
Exactly. That's exactly what happens, and that's what I love about that stuff. And maybe I don't know if it's the music itself or it just has to do with at what period in my life I discovered it, But I talked about it with some friends recently. There's like an age probably between 12 and 17 or something where you discover all that stuff, and the stuff that you discover in the time period, that's really what sticks with you. And I really believe in that. And for me it was those guys, and all these bands from the 80s and 90s. This is basically my musical DNA. And recently I've been finding myself going back more often. I'm not saying there's no good stuff anymore. There's tons of good music around, but like there's still so much stuff from the past that I don't know that is so great. So when I discover new music, or music that's new for me, it's very often older stuff, that's like I'm getting back listening to some of the influences of my influences, right? So I'm listening to a lot of 70s players now, like Robin Trower or Pat Trevor's band, or Michael Schenker, stuff like Saga, like I have more appreciation now for stuff like that than I had when I was younger. I can pick up things that I couldn't pick up on earlier. And so recently I find myself more going back with new music that I discover, actually.
Now, there's not a lot going around, at least that I can find on the internet yet, but maybe obviously you can elaborate a little bit. So tell me a little bit about RETROMORPHOSIS, this new band that you got that you got underway here. How far into the process are you? What can we expect from them?
Yeah, so the album is finished. For me, I joined very late. I mean, when I was in Spawn of Possession, it was still the Spawn of Possession album, and Curse still is one of my favorite albums I ever recorded and played on. And it was always a shame when this band ended. And then I heard 2 years ago already through my friend Hannes that Jonas is doing a new band. And I heard some demos. I was like, oh, this stuff sounds amazing. I bet this is going to be great. And so, the album is finished. But what happened was I got into the band very late. So I got into the band actually, I joined RETROMORPHOSIS in the end of May. It was in May that Jonas wrote me. He was like, man, looking for a lead guitar player. I couldn't find the right guy. Would you be interested in doing this? And because I really loved the Spawn of Possession record and working with him because his compositions are so amazing, and the progressions he writes are so great to play over. I was like instantly yes, I want to do this. And then he sent me the songs, and then I recorded the solos within a week. And so the album is finished. It's being mixed right now. I think the mix will be finished by the end of August. Then it will be out hopefully early next year. And it's kind of like Spawn of Possession in the sense that it has all these like neoclassical overtones, but not neoclassical in the Baroque sense, but kind of like Spawn of Possession was, drawing influence from more 20th century classical composers. But maybe it's not as fast or long-winded as Spawn of Possession was, a little bit more old schoolish maybe in approach, It has a lot of the orchestral kind of elements that the song The Apparition had from In Corso. Quite minimal, but you find it here and there in all of the songs. It has this very sacral horror movie type of vibe. So I'm really, really, really excited about that record. I think this is definitely going to be one of my new favorites of the albums that I played on. And everybody who loved Spawn of Possession will definitely love it, but also people who like a little bit more old school early 90s death metal approach, because I think it's a little bit closer to that than Spawn of Possession was. So it's kind of in between these two worlds. And so I think, every death metal fan will love it. And I'm really, really happy with the solos I played. Like on In Corso, I discovered a kind of a new voice to my playing.
Yeah.
So and there was one of these moments that sometimes happens where things just go by themselves, where you feel like a bigger kind of force is guiding you through something. That
right.
Everything just happened automatically. I sent the solos to Jonas, and he was like, "Man, it's amazing. Don't change anything." So he didn't want me to change anything. Like I just kept everything. A lot of like first takes, a lot of like improvised takes on that, and I'm really excited about that. So yeah.
And when you guys sit around in whatever band that you're going out with, when you go out to play live, does it change your perspective, or does it change the way you map out your itinerary and accept certain offers, to go out and play? Are you careful about not setting yourself up with a grueling schedule because of the focal dystonia? Has that affected your mindset, as to when you go out and play?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially in the early days, back in 2012, there was a tour we did OBSCURA and Spawn of Possession together. And my doctor and therapist and myself, we were all agreed this is just too much for my hand to play two of these kind of sets. And neither so my friend Danny Tanga back then played in Spawn of Possession instead of me, because I simply couldn't do it for this reason. And nowadays it's a little bit of a concern, but sometimes, man, recently the offers, they get so good, and like there's things I just want to do them.
Right.
And like I find a way to do it. And I think I have the practice methods and habits now that I don't overstress myself. And we did really, really long tours with OBSCURA. We did a 2-month tour in USA and Canada and Mexico last year, which was really crazy. But I really didn't have any problems on the tour. I never felt like the dystonia kind of making things hard for me or something. And now it's like, of course, if I have a tour with that band lined up and then immediately 3 days later a tour with another band, I have to learn the set list and things like that. If that happens, obviously, I'm like, okay, is this a good idea with the dystonia? Do I have to be a little bit careful with that? But nowadays, I think, whereas 10 years ago I was like, maybe don't do it. Nowadays, I just want to do it. I want to get out there. I want to play when the offer is good. And then I'm like, I'll do it. And then in the next step, I think, okay, how am I going to do this? And then
I'll do it, but how?
Yeah, exactly. It all comes down to planning things. If I can practice long time in advance and can start really slow and can take 8 to 10 weeks to really build up the repertoire, so I never really have to play stressed, then I can really build it up that I get things up to speed and then really can play them in a relaxed way. But obviously, if an offer comes on short notice and say, okay, you have to learn a tech test set of 60 minutes until next week Friday, then obviously I'll be like, I don't know if that's a realistic thing right now.
Are there things that you noticed, any external forces that trigger any aggravations of this impairment of yours? And the second part to that, are there things that you do out on the road to alleviate any flare-ups?
Yes, absolutely. So what happens with dystonia is, like, when you feel stressed or when you get nervous or stressed or are very tense, then the symptoms are worse, because what happens is, obviously, stress is an emotion.
Yeah.
And obviously what happens is your muscles get more tense and you might not even notice that, right? And it starts from your neck. So when your neck muscles get tense, then obviously you feel tense in your shoulders, you feel tense in your forearms, you feel tense in your hand and in your fingers, and obviously then the dystonia gets worse. So what I learned was in my therapy classes. There is this so-called somatic sense. It's a sense that gives you a feedback about your state of your muscle tension. And you can learn to observe that. So the so-called Feldenkrais technique or Alexander technique, where you just lay on the floor and you try to address your muscles, starting from the neck muscles, and loosening them. So I do these kind of exercises frequently, even on the road. And then when I'm in a situation, when let's say it's very stressful, some of the schedule gets messed up and you arrive late, you have to play and things are super hectic, and then go, and you have to get out, play the stressful material with all the stuff. Obviously, I feel like, okay, I notice I feel emotionally tense and nervous, or it stresses me a little bit, but through what I've learned, I can then address, okay, I cannot get rid of this state emotionally, but I can get rid of the unnecessary muscle tension that it creates. So even in these moments, I'm able to address, okay, no, I want to free up my neck muscles, and I can kind of still, even when feeling stressed or nervous, I can address my muscle tension, that it doesn't really make me go like this,
Yeah.
And the first thing, it took me a couple of years, was to build an awareness for that, and then learning how to address these things, and then I can really prevent the dystonia from getting worse. Same thing. Sometimes it happened to me in the early days. I would make a mistake, and I would get angry at myself for that, and then from the anger, I increased my muscle tension without being aware of it, and then obviously you play worse for the rest of the show. And now I learn to also mentally and psychologically to kind of like, if something stupid happens in the first song, just let go of it and just continue with the same conviction,
right,
the rest of the set. And even if I don't feel too good, being able to address the state of my muscle tension, so I can prevent the dystonia from going too crazy.
Now, you mentioned that it was very frustrating that it took a couple years, for you to get properly diagnosed.
Right.
So what did that look like? Like, what did you have to go through, like a series of a test? Like, why was it so long? Why did it take so long to pinpoint what this was?
Because many doctors don't really know what this is, because it's a musician's disorder, and it's not something that affects people in the daily life, really. So it's not really something that's very well known. There's not a lot of money funding for the studies for this.
Right.
So I went to normal hand doctors and hand clinics, and I did all the tests with the electroshocks and all of that, to see how the impulses, how fast they go, and if there's any like carpal tunnel thing going on or anything. And it was nothing of that. And so they said, no, your hands are fine, And I went through 2 or 3 different doctors. Every time got the same answer: no, your hands are fine, there's nothing wrong with you. And I was even more convinced that it had to be a lack of practice. So I practiced more, things got worse,
Right.
And then we I did a couple of tours. Well, all that happened. It was 2009, 2010, 2011. And then I remember 2011, we played in a tour in Indonesia, and I played in Jakarta. And what happened was my dystonia got really bad on that show. I don't know if people noticed, probably, but I was really frustrated after the show, right? And I told the guys, I can't keep doing this anymore. I don't know what's wrong with my hand. I stopped playing. It's just not working anymore. And then Linus was our bass player at the time, Linus Klausnitzer, and his father is also has his own orchestra. And he's like, don't worry, I call my father, describe your symptoms, because he knows a lot of musicians who had certain problems with their hands. And while we were in Indonesia, after the show in Jakarta, Linus called his father on a mobile phone, described the symptoms, and then his father said instantly, oh, that's focal dystonia. And then he recommended me the doctor that I went to. So while I was on tour in Indonesia, I called my father at home, told him to make an appointment with that particular doctor. It's called Dr. Altmüller in Germany. I'm still seeing that guy for this issue. And so while I was on tour in Southeast Asia, basically, my father made the appointment for me at the doctor. So once I returned from the tour, I went to that doctor, and then I did a lot of like tests, the usual tests that you do for that. And then I got diagnosed with it, and then I could work with it, because then I knew what was going on. And then in the beginning was a little bit dark, because then you read, there's no cure for this, it's progressive, it's game over, blah, blah,
Right.
And then I also read stories of musicians that continued despite that and even got better. And so then I could take my journey on the correct direction.
Are there other players that you know of that have this?
Oh yeah, the Alex Webster of Cannibal Corpse has it in his right hand, but he did it a bit later than me, because he got it a few years later than I got it. Terry Cyrek, my friend, is a guitar player. I played in my solo on my second solo record. He had it since 1989. He plays basically with 2 fingers only of his left hand, but he still plays things that no other human being is capable of playing.
Yeah.
He's still one of the most insane players I've ever heard.
Well, let's not forget that the great aforementioned Tony Iommi, for God's sake, lopped off part of his goddamn finger. So I mean,
exactly. And there's lots of players with like limitations that kind of made their strength. Now, like I know that Chris Poland has a problem in his index finger, and he can't really turn it because it's like a joint too much or something like that. And his finger's always like that, but that's why he can do these insanely wide bends. As for vocal dystonia, obviously, Keith Emerson had it. Apparently, it was his reason for suiciding, even in the end, but he probably didn't really find a good approach to it.
Right.
And there's this guitar player called Alfred Koffler from this German hair metal band, Pink Room 69, the old band of Andy Darris, who is in Halloween now. There's a couple of players who have one of the guitar players in the Hellercasters actually has it, and he sees the same doctor as me to get his Botox injections. And I know there's a couple of people who talk to me about it, but they don't want that I talk about it officially because they don't want the public to know.
But the point is, though, is that there are people that are still going on with very successful careers. You mentioned Alex Webster. I mean, for God's sake, they're the greatest death metal band of all time. I mean, he's done pretty well for himself despite this.
Exactly. And I even believe there's some players who have it to a certain degree, because there's mild cases, there's severe cases, I believe there's some players who have some mild cases of it and they don't even know that they have it, Some players that I see to play with a quite limited technique and find their workarounds for things, and they don't know why, because it's always been like that. And probably these are mild cases of vocal dystonia as well. So I'm really starting to believe that. I know that Roman Goulon, who was in Necrophages, the drummer after Hannes Schlussmann, he also has this problem, but he has it in his legs, from what I heard. So there's definitely a couple of players in the field.
Well, it's obviously very inspiring, though. I think it's good for other people who may be hearing this, who may not even just specifically have vocal dystonia, but just to show that you can have these kind of impairments and still do what you love. I mean,
exactly.
Don't let it stop you.
Exactly, because the first thing is you don't have to play like everybody else anyway.
Right.
Somebody else played like that before. Find your own way of doing things.
Right.
And sometimes this can be a strength. I mean, many, for example, if I think of many of the players that I really like, they were not always the technically most proficient. If you look at many of the 80s players, like 70s, 80s, like Michael Schenker, Under the Rock, all of these guys, they're not the most technically proficient that they could play anything. They wouldn't be the best session guys, but they have their own unique style, their own unique sound. And this is why they had a career, because this is what people like about them.
Right.
And I think that if you find your own way of doing things, then you find you're getting closer to your unique own sound and style. Sometimes when I for example, I've been teaching guitar a lot for 20 years now. And if I teach at a music school, I don't do this anymore, but when I used to, I had very young students, 4 or 5 years. When you give very young kids a guitar, they obviously don't know what to do with it, and they just play with it rhythmically and do things. Right. But because that they're more creative than people who are confined in the little space of what you're allowed to do.
Right.
And that's why sometimes do like these exercises with students. Like, imagine you can only play with one finger and only on one string, and then you have to limit you can't use all your chops anymore. You have to limit yourself to melodic and rhythmic ideas, and these kind of things make you more creative.
Right.
In that sense, the limitation can be an advantage in the sense that it makes you more creative.
Right.
In ways that other people don't think about because they don't have to think about it. Right. But once this happens, you need to start to think differently, and that gets you closer to your own musical voice and musical language or identity.
Now, where did the impetus for you come for teaching? That's obviously not an avenue that everybody loves to go down, because it can be very frustrating. You have to put a lot, into, especially as you say, when you're teaching very young kids, sometimes the focus isn't there, the discipline isn't there. You've really got to, my mom has been a teacher for a long time. You really got to have a passion for it. Where does that come from for you? What kind of sparked that for you to start teaching?
Okay, well, in the beginning, I started teaching simply out of necessity, because
make a living.
And touring alone didn't pay the bills. And I was like, I need to do something else. But then I was like, okay, we have all these tours lined up. I finished university. If I go into an engineer's job now, I simply won't have the time to go on tour whenever I need to.
Right.
In teaching, if I do it self-employed, basically allows me to have the freedom. So that was out of necessity in the beginning. And then I obviously did the thing that many people do, working at local music stores, teaching children. And very often it was frustrating, like it's kind of like most people, they don't really obviously have the same drive as a professional musician as they just want to play for fun. They maybe don't practice only in the class. Right. You have to be okay with that also, because at least they play once a week. But what happened as my career progressed and I got a little bit more famous, I could start the online teaching thing, and I didn't really have to do the music school thing so much anymore. And then what happened was that I started having students that had their own careers, you know, like Scott Carstairs from Fallujah. Then one of my students now plays in Insurrection. Another one of my students is now on tour opening up for Possessed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so many. One of my students played in this band Fractal Universe, you know, like plays in this band Fractal Universe. So many of my students, and one of them plays. One of the guitar players in Lorna Shore was my student actually.
Okay,
kind of
big bands. Yeah.
So even many of them are actually more successful than me actually.
Yeah.
You know, and kind of that's actually a big compliment, you know, for a teacher, because I'm like, okay, obviously these people had the drive and dedication. If they had not taken lessons with me, I'm sure they still would have made their way otherwise, you know, that definitely. So it's not not all of this is my it's because of me, but still, you know, when I see people that took lessons with me and then later on I see them make it in their career and things like that, that's really a very, very positive
gratifying.
You know? Yeah, and also when you see, okay, maybe they use some of the concepts I've been teaching them, but in their own ways, you know. So even after, maybe when I'm done playing music, it's kind of like these couple little few things that I thought about that were my own approaches or things, you know, that they found their way into the music world and they kind of keep living on there and expanding, you know.
Yeah.
And that's actually a very, very very nice thing. And nowadays I really enjoy teaching. I teach only on Skype nowadays, and I get some really dedicated, really good students, you know.
Yeah.
And usually I can tell, okay, this guy's going to have a career definitely because they have such a drive and such a vision. And that's actually very, very, very fulfilling, you know. It's still not the same as writing music and touring, kind of that, but it's still a very nice job to have for the times when I'm not touring, and I really, really enjoy it.
I'll tell you what, Christian, I'm so glad that we got a chance to do this again, man. I know that we had an interview last month, and it wasn't the best quality, man. And this is the interview that I wanted to have right here, where you came across really good, and the connection was great, and it was a great representation of you. You know, I wanted the episode, you know, because I was looking forward to it so much. I love everything that you do. I love your playing, man. I wish you all the success in the world with all your projects going forward, man. And I'm so glad we got to nail down this time and got to get this done, man, so I can actually put up a good, high-quality interview of you. So I'm pleased that you made the time to do it, and I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, well, it was my pleasure, man. I really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully talk to you soon.
And please stay in touch, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Definitely, anytime.
Please stay in touch, and I'll send you a link when I put your episode up. Feel free to share it wherever, man. I appreciate it. Yeah. Good talking to you, Christian. Best of luck with everything. I'm looking forward to the ALKALOID album. I really am.
Thank you so much.
All right. Talk to you soon, Christian. All right. Later, buddy. Later. There he goes, folks. That is Christian MUNZNER. Let me put my glasses on here so I can make sure that I list off the plethora, a word that I love to use, of bands that he is in. Of course, the great OBSCURA. Nothing more needs to be said there. ALKALOID is the band that he's about to put out an album with here next month. Fantastic band, extremely heavy, clean vocals, growls. Hear a lot of, as I said, King Diamond and Rob Halford in the vocal approach. Paradox, Eternity's End, you know, a new band, RETROMORPHOSIS, which is still kind of in the embryonic state, so to speak. So the guy has his hands in a lot of different things, but he's a phenomenally talented player who just, you know, when he puts his stamp on these musical projects, they go through the fucking roof. The guy's amazing, and he suffers from focal dystonia, which, as you heard, does affect the way, you know, he had to revamp the whole way that he played. You know, a neurological impairment that's, you know, would seem catastrophic, you know, completely detrimental to what he does, but yet he found a way to work around it. So that's a very heroic endeavor. The fact that, you know, that he managed this, and not only managed it, but came out the other end and still is doing what the fuck he loves to fucking do, and that's make fucking great music. Plus, he's got a bunch of solo work out there too. So, you know, this guy's very prolific, puts out great music, writes great music, and I think people would identify with OBSCURA would be the name of the band that would the band that would jump out at you like, oh yeah, OBSCURA, of course. But look up Christian MUNZNER. Lots of great stuff that has him all over it. His phenomenal guitar playing, his phenomenal tone. And as I mentioned, we did do an interview about a month ago. he was home. The internet connection was not so great. It was very pixelated. He was getting very frozen. I was losing his audio quite a bit. So long story short, we've been talking ever since then about redoing the episode and really getting a good quality episode of him up. And finally got the chance to do it, man. And so glad that we fucking did. Always a pleasure talking to him. Just a fucking great guy, man. And a phenomenally talented guitar player. So go check out everything that Christian Munzner has his fucking hands in, because guaranteed it'll be fucking kick-ass. So hope you guys enjoyed that episode. And until we get together and we do this thing again, and we will do it again very soon, remember, guys, take it easy and keep it sleazy.